Geoff Wardle. And Geoff Wardle comes from Art Center College of Design. He's been in charge of the transportation group in Europe there. He has come over here relatively recently to Pasadena, where he's head of corporate relations right now. He's somebody who trained as an automotive designer. When we first got in touch with each other, it was clear to me that a lot of the ideas about mobility and the need to think from a new vantage point were manifesting within his head. And we had come to this, he'd just come into this place that I was at, I guess, from a totally different door, which I think is always very interesting. So he's got pictures. The rest of the show is all pictures, if you need pictures. But he's got pictures, and we're going to kind of keep this thing moving as quick as we need to. And you two guys, thanks a lot. If you need listen, stay around, listen, and if you gotta go, you gotta go. So here's Geoff.
Yes, this slide pretty much sums up what I'm going to talk to you about, the message that I'd like to share with you. For most people living in the developed economies at least, personal mobility means the automobile. However, as we all know, the car is becoming increasingly out of control, creating absurd gridlock and making more and more people's lives miserable every day. As the auto industry has saturated the developed economies with its products, it now prays that it can persuade the developing economies to become hooked on its products too. I, for one, look on in dismay. That viable alternative to the car are needed is quite clear. That's why we're all here today. But mobility is not just about moving ants around. With the greatest respect to ants, and I think there's a lot that we can learn off ants when it comes to mobility, but the mobility that we're talking about today is about connecting human beings at many different levels. I guess I epitomize what we're up against. I love cars. I've been a car designer, as Dan said, for much of my career, in addition to running a transportation design program for one of the world's leading transportation design schools, not to mention teaching car design to hungry young men and a few women, eager to design more cars too. And I love owning cars. I love driving cars. Owning a car for me is as much about driving dynamics and feeling the road as it is about looks. I love the freedom of mobility that cars and motorcycles give me, the freedom to roam the planet in my own time. However, perhaps it is this love affair with the cars and driving them that many years ago started to trigger alarm bells inside me. I started to realize that the increasing proliferation of cars and the use of cars was rapidly eroding the enjoyment that they gave me. As a designer intuitively searching for better answers, I need to be able to contribute to finding those better alternatives to the car, whilst understanding that we can't just ignore what people love about cars. I still love cars per se, but now I passionately believe that the use of the car needs to be reined in quite dramatically. Not necessarily the car industry itself, though, and I'll get to that a little bit later. As a designer, I think that it is necessary to be very honest with ourselves as to why the car has been so successful before we seek alternative or complementary systems of mobility, and why so many people have had this extraordinary love affair with the car. We all know the history of the car, how it changed the way of life for millions of people in America and Europe, and then in many other parts of the globe. We know how huge and persuasive the auto industry has become. It's easy to understand how the car industry became the love child of the whole capitalist free market economy system. Now all of the developed economies of the world, and now many of the developing economies of the world, rely to an extraordinary degree on the car industry for economic activity, employment and wealth creation. We know and understand why the automobile has for millions become not just a utensil, but a complex metaphor in our lives, a symbol of status, power and personal expression. It's this extraordinary interest that a vast section of the population places in the car, whose custodian is the free market enterprise system, that has ensured the car's proliferation during the 20th century. Meanwhile, alternative modes of surface transportation have been denied the same powerful custodian. For various reasons, they have all become victims of their own inflexibility. Their resulting economic decline or complexity has led to political interference or control, albeit quite often with the best intentions. Anything that is subject, though, to political interference or control is subject to short-term expediency and usually denied long-term vision, an unfortunate flaw in most of the democratic ideologies. Therefore, the car industry has continued to proliferate. Its competitors continue their decline to oblivion. However, it's only a matter of common sense to realise that if the car industry were to implode, there would be catastrophic economic and social consequences around the world. There are many reasons why the car, but not by my reckoning, the car industry needs to be reined in. Sadly, the car's negative environmental impact seems of little importance to the majority of its users. What will cause the car's eventual downfall is its proliferation, the gradual realization by its users that it's no longer giving them the freedom of personal mobility that they thought that they were buying into. Already there are vast urban and semi-urban regions of the globe where infrastructure gridlock is a daily frustrating and expensive inconvenience. No, not an inconvenience really, an absurdity. When the people start to fall out of love with the car, that's when the car industry really needs to start to worry. It thinks it's in for a rough trip this coming year, but wait and see what happens later. However, the worldwide demand for personal mobility will only continue to increase. Too many people around the globe have now experienced or been exposed to the dream of personal mobility. The car can and should remain an important component of personal mobility. However, its design and use should be in appropriate ways. There is no shortage of technical solutions or ideas for alternative means of transport and mobility. The problem in providing them is one primarily of economic motivation, understanding their true efficiency. I believe that there is a huge opportunity for the car industry itself to take bold initiatives in solving many of the global mobility issues that we face now and will face in the future. If the auto industry can start to redefine itself as a provider of mobility and not as a manufacturer of cars, it can begin to ensure that its overall business and profitability can continue to grow regardless of whether the car remains everyone's favourite mode of transportation. Similarly, major and emerging economies can breathe a sigh of relief because a collapse in the car market need not mean a collapse in one of the major pillars of their economic activity. You may question why the industry that has caused so many of the problems should be entrusted to solve them. The truth is that just as the car industry and economic prosperity in the industrialized world have scratched each other's backs, so that same relationship can continue to prosper by widening the car industry's horizons. The auto industry also has at its fingertips a huge understanding of market economics, tremendous efficient manufacturing capacity, an enormous and diverse supplier chain, hundreds of thousands of highly skilled engineers and technicians, a global perspective, and also understands very well the art of persuasion. The auto industry may need help, though, to be shown incentives to kickstart the process, economic models of business opportunities for reforming itself. Of course, if the auto industry chooses not to take such initiatives, one cruel way of encouraging it to do so would be to mandate it to take responsibility for the infrastructure that its products rely on, like operators of other transportation systems are obliged to do. However, there is one other community, apart from the car industry, that I believe has a big responsibility in all of this, and that is the design community. Designers both within and outside of the car industry, and of different disciplines, have two very powerful contributions to make, which are little understood perhaps outside the design world. One, they instinctively see the big picture before solving problems, and two, are extremely adept at being able to present complex ideas or solutions to a wide audience in a format that anyone can understand. these reasons alone, a good designer can contribute far more to an organisation or a cause than just the form and function of its products. By nature, a designer looks to understand the whole problem before designing a solution. An engineer or scientist, for example, tends to look at only a specific area of the problem before providing his or her specialised contribution to an overall solution. A designer is required to propose a solution to a complete product, even if technologists are needed to figure out the specifics. I see that solving the world's transportation and mobility problems emphatically requires seeing the whole picture, the big picture. I know that for many years and all over the globe there have been very many worthy research projects into transportation systems and mobility problems. I fear, however, that the real importance, relevance and value of much of this research has gone largely unnoticed because the research was very deep but also very narrow and did not necessarily address the big picture. Nobody ever understood its significance either, because it was never presented to the right audience in an understandable format. Designers can help tremendously to knit all of these complex activities into an understandable fabric. Great designers really understand people's relationship with products, systems and messages, their emotions. No systems, however smart, will succeed if they don't address people's real needs and emotions. I believe that if we are really going to get to grips with devising and defining viable transportation, mobility and living systems for the future, we need to encourage multidisciplinary research institutions within a very design-oriented environment. Don't misunderstand me here. I'm not talking about making everything look slick and shiny. I'm talking about the creative process. It's not just mobility and transportation that has to be dealt with. It's everything about the way we live and the way we think. To reiterate, it's important to make sure that in creating solutions to sustainable global mobility, we always keep an eye on the big picture. We must remember the realities of human emotions and fickleness. We talk about sustainability, a somewhat overwrought word perhaps these days, like organic. But let's be clear about one thing. Whilst the developing and poorest economies around the world, who of course deserve the same chances at decent living standards as those of us in the West, as we've come to call it, the brutal truth is that if all 6 billion of us, and I understood this morning actually there are 8 billion of us, but even if 6 billion of us on this planet live the way we do now, nothing will be sustainable. True sustainability will only be achieved when all human beings on this planet can live alongside all other existing animals and plant life in perpetuity. The free market economy and the car industry thrive during growth, but neither has yet learned to deal with recession. Like living organisms, they both need to be flexible enough to live with both growth and decay. We need to promote and design new ways of living that require us to drastically reduce the amount of energy-dependent travelling we do without taking away our freedom to explore, a kind of static mobility, perhaps. The cost of energy is ridiculously cheap, therefore we squander it. I also believe that many of our problems could be solved if the cost of energy for personal transportation reflected its intrinsic value rather than its free market value. Above all, as vast areas of the world begin to develop their economies, we all need to work together to help them develop much smarter and more appealing living and mobility systems than exist today in the West, from which we in turn can learn from and adapt for ourselves. If we don't, we will create a mobility desert. Thank you.